This is Kuldrin's Krypt, Season 1, Episode 21, for July 9th, 2017.
Welcome. Welcome to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, this is a place to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions, or visit the Krypt at kuldrinscrypt.com. On this episode of The Krypt, it is all about BDSM without sex. But first, I have to say hello to my lovely co-host, Funsize.
Hello, Kuldrin.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Before we get into the main topic, I have a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. First, I'd like to thank our Patreon supporter, The Accidental Trucker. He's been around since the beginning of the show. He gives $1 a month. If any listeners getting anything at all out of the show, we'd be grateful if they'd visit the site, click on Support Us tab, and give through Patreon. The second thing, how do you feel about BDSM contracts?
I love them. I really do. And I am so grateful for their support to us.
BDSMcontracts.org. I've been talking to Lily over there. She's given us some of her soft-bound and hard-bound contracts to give away. If you use the coupon code Kuldrin20, you'll receive a 20% discount on all purchases. And I highly recommend checking them out. It's not just a company. It is true lifestylers that run this, and Lily is an amazing person. So, with that said, rules to love by. First, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Second, KNKI, KNKI from the KNKI app, available on all platforms. That stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And third, that wonderful quote by Paul Young, submission is not about authority and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. And moving on into BDSM without sex. Funsize, how do you want to start this out? It's an amazing conversation to have because most people, I guess, view it as just completely kinky and they don't realize that most of what we do really doesn't have anything to do with sex.
It really doesn't. It's more about building communication and intimacy. And intimacy doesn't mean sex. It means closeness. And I think BDSM without sex can build that really, really well. I'd like to look at that aspect of things today.
I agree 100%. So we've, as always, put together some show notes and talked about this a little bit in our own personal experiences with this. How else would you like to approach this as far as people thinking that BDSM is a metaphor for sex or things of this nature?
I actually find the idea of BDSM as a metaphor for sex really funny to me because everything in life, and this is actually paraphrasing a quote from Oscar Wilde, is that everything in life is about sex except for sex, which is about power. Well, BDSM is about power and intimacy, but it doesn't always have to include sex. And that is something that I always found funny because BDSM is the one exception to that rule, I feel. I actually came across an article a couple weeks ago about BDSM without sex, and it starts out so beautifully that I feel like it is the best I have ever found for explaining the intimacy of the whole relationship without getting into what the sex is. Because, you know, as we're saying here today, there doesn't have to be sex.
Right. Where was this article? What was this? Tell me about it.
This article is actually part of a series off arrowsexposed.com. It's written by the runner of the website, and it's a BDSM and relationship and sex oriented website, if you ever care to check it out. And the article is actually part 5 of a BDSM series, specifically on non-sexual submission and domination. He starts out this article by painting the scene of walking through a dark forest, only you have someone there that you can trust to lead you through this darkness. And that's how submission feels, is you're getting led through a dark forest. You may not know the way, you may not know the path, you know, the sunset, but you have this dominant there that's able to guide you safely. And it doesn't have to do with sex. It doesn't. It has to do with having someone that can guide you through things that might be scary, that might be lonely. And that's a very intimate feeling. And it's very intimate for the dominants too, because you have this person that trusts you and you are guiding them through a dark forest. I love this article because that's how it starts out. And then it gets a little bit deeper into why people want submission and domination without any sexual activities.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. You'll have to make sure to get me to the link so I can put that in the show notes. You said that's erosexposed.com?
Yeah, EROS exposed.com.
Wow. Cool. Have you had any relationships that were built like this?
Absolutely. Haven't you?
Yes, several of them. And yeah, I have. And often they're some of the most enjoyable and satisfying because we often tend to confuse intimacy, as you said, and sex. And it's that true intimacy of that trust and love and respect that comes through just brilliantly through a non-sexual BDSM relationship. I really, really enjoy them. And that sounds very strange to a lot of people, but I think as we go through this and give a little bit more of ourselves and of course maintain the integrity of what we've put together here, people will come to understand it a little better.
I hope so. The other thing that I would include with that is that in my relationships that have not had anything sexual in them, I have found a much deeper connection with myself. I hope that's something that our listeners will be able to relate to or try and see if it works the same way for them, because you can reach places not only in a relationship with the other person, but within yourself and how you view yourself when you take sex out of the picture.
I didn't even think about that, but that is so true. So moving on into some of the things that you have put together, and I'll definitely give you credit for putting this together. Why is it okay or preferable for some to have BDSM without sex? And that's a question that I get asked quite frequently, especially because of a current relationship. I've spoken just a little bit recently about I'm kind of talking to somebody, and we've actually been talking since late last year, November, December. And I've recently discussed entering into a non-sexual BDSM relationship with her. So again, that's something that I get asked a lot. So let's hear your thoughts on this topic as far as why would someone want to do that?
Well, going back to the Oscar Wilde quote about everything except for sex being about sex, I would say that this is, as I said, the exception, because you can have this one thing that isn't about sex, and it's not necessarily about power, though it can be very powerful for you. And there is definitely a power flow. I won't call it an exchange because it's not really an exchange. It's a flow and balance. And I find it to be so much more intimate, and you have ways to communicate about what your needs are. And it's not, oh, I need this sexual service done. It's, I need more time cuddling. And that's a very basic human need that it's a lot easier to communicate because you don't have this other thing in the picture, which tends to be a really big thing for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And then I would say that one of the other things is marriage.
Yeah.
You and I are both married in our real lives, and our spouses have very different views, and everyone's spouse has a very different view on how to handle their significant other's BDSM lifestyle. And there are some who are not okay with the idea of their spouse having any form of sexual relation with anyone else. And you don't want to destroy your marriage in order to have this, but it is a basic need, just like breathing and eating and sleeping for those in the lifestyle. And I find that BDSM without any sexual activities is a way to have that. It is the compromise that can get all of your needs and your wants fulfilled.
Absolutely. And I think that that's probably one of the bigger reasons that I run into personally with other people is that they have an understanding, but you know, and my wife and I, we definitely have an understanding. She's vanilla with sprinkles and she doesn't mind what I do. In fact, she's very supporting. So for me, it's not necessarily the marriage part of it, but in some ways it is. It's like there are things going on right now with us that make me have absolutely no need or desire as far as sexually to go outside the marriage.
The other part that I would include with marriage under that little subheading is that a lot of us have grown up in such traditional backgrounds where you had one significant other and it's very monogamous. And for some of us, it's really hard to step outside that monogamy just to have our basic BDSM needs fulfilled. And then if you try entering anything sexual into that, then you have this guilt of adultery and cheating and these things in your head that you really don't need in your life, and they're not very nice or helpful to you in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is a path that you can take to find a balance without any of that guilt.
I agree. And that's a very good point to make because, one of my big goals when I started this was maintaining integrity and not making it smut. Make sure that I don't get that explicit tag because I want to reach a variety of people. And I've been contacted by nearly a member of every type of religion and things of this nature. And a lot of people have those questions that are of a religious nature. So this is one that has been highly anticipated by a lot of people, this particular topic, because they wanted to know, okay, how can I maintain my Christian faith or whatever faith and still participate in this lifestyle because it is a need that they have. And I've got an episode that I'm researching and working on that will be probably a few months down the road before I'm done with it because it's a very controversial one, but it is BDSM in the Bible. So that's just a heads up.
I'm actually really looking forward to doing that episode with you because I know your background in religion and you're well aware of mine off the mic.
Correct.
And I'm really looking forward to that learning opportunity as both a co-host and a listener.
I've learned a lot on it, or I've learned a lot by researching it, which some I already knew and some is completely new to me, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but I'm going to throw everything out there that I find, and it will directly relate to this episode as well. I can tell you that. So it's fascinating. But anyway, getting back into this, simplifying things as a preferable way for BDSM without sex. That one, absolutely. I've got a lot on that in my history because sex always tends to complicate. And I think that to keep it simple and primarily focused on just satisfying those needs, if you don't cross that line and you set that out there as a very firm, a hard line or hard limit, then it will keep the positive energy and the vibe of that relationship as a positive one.
I would also say that it simplifies things in the sense that everyone needs rules. Everyone needs to know boundaries. That's why societies at the beginning of time set up laws and ethics and morals. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing. If you set this boundary that this is not going to be part of your BDSM lifestyle, then I feel like it sets up a limit for you that is basically unmovable. And I feel like that's a very healthy thing to do. Everyone needs some sort of discipline in their life. And I don't mean discipline in the sense of punishment. I mean discipline in the sense of rules of what you find acceptable.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a very healthy mindset to have. So I personally really love the idea of BDSM without sex, just for that reason.
Yeah. Now, I've got a question for you since you're a big online player.
Okay.
In your role play with your online doms and subs, or dom and subs, do you consider that as a sexual nature, or, I mean, does that count? Does that not count?
To me, that counts. And I'm not sure if people will take this the wrong way, but I feel like I have a very worldview of what counts as sex versus an American view. And I'm going to explain that before I get any hate mail.
Please do.
The worldview, as I'm pointing out, and I don't mean the whole world. I mean, to me, a vast majority of the world counts things that are not just penetration as sexual activities. They count, not to get explicit into it, but anything with the mouth or the hands on parts or even online play as being sexual and being sex, and they would consider it sex. Whereas in America, for the most part, and I do say for the most part because it is not all of us, I am an American and I own to that fact, it has to be penetration for it to count as sex, is the vast overview.
Yeah. ever since Slick Willie in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, according to the vast majority of the rest of the world, he did. That's why I say I have a worldview. So before I get the hate mail, I will explain myself, and I'm happy to explain myself on any topic where there's questions.
I really don't think they will be. I think most people will agree with that, especially given the general age group of our listeners. I think they'll take that and understand. But I'll say I'm the same way. Even getting online with cam models and things of that nature, I'll agree 100%. I believe that is a sexual act that you are sharing with someone, or in a lot of cases, if it's an open video chat type thing, you're sharing that experience with a lot of people. So moving on, is there anything else that you can think of? I'm racking my brain as far as why this would be a preferable arrangement.
I have one, and it's a bit of a sticky topic.
Okay.
But I'm gonna dive on in, and I'm not meaning this in any dirty sense, so no one jump the gun on me.
Fire at will.
Okay. One way that it simplifies things is children. You can have a BDSM relationship, and you don't want to have to worry about the chance of having kids. You can be married and having a BDSM relationship, and you don't want to go, oh no, what if this dominant in my life that's not my spouse is the father of my child or something? It can really simplify that, and I know that's a really sticky topic to throw in, but that is a risk that we run in our day-to-day lives. And if you're having BDSM without sex, you also reduce the risk of any STDs or STIs. While there is still a risk if there is any broken skin, anything like that, bodily fluids being spread around, there is still the risk, but it is reduced. Just throwing that out there for our listeners in case they need to weigh their pros and cons a bit.
Yeah, I think that really gets into ways that it can help. Having this type of relationship can actually help your BDSM experience. Yeah. Which we've touched on as far as clarity and intimacy, not having any blurred lines, and maintaining that different level of intimacy without throwing all kinds of other emotional blunders into the mix. And then the religious aspect of it, I guess, not feeling guilty or having questions of adultery or cheating, things of this nature. And that's a huge, huge reason in people that I've spoken with that they won't get into it. They have this need and desire, and they've even discussed it with their spouse, but they feel that you can't participate without sex. So hopefully this will definitely help clear that up. What about achieving this? I know how I go about it. In fact, recently with this person that I've been talking to, I told her that after thinking about things and talking with my wife about things and the state of my relationship with my wife, I just flat out at dinner said it. I thought it was going to be uncomfortable, but I guess because of the nature of the openness that we often talk about, it really wasn't that hard. It seemed like it was going to be because I know that there's a very large sexual attraction there, and it's something that she has told me that she wanted. But when I expressed it, because of her level of maturity and her history in this lifestyle, it was no big deal. She's like, oh, okay, well, that's not going to be a hard limit for me. So yeah, we can just be play partners.
I feel like the openness is good, but I also feel like I personally can relate to what you were saying about being worried to come out and say it, because even with as open as we are people, and we do fear rejection. Yeah. And I know there have been times when I've had to step up and state that as a rule, as both roles in submission and domination, that I had this pause in my head, like, okay, I cannot do this. I cannot have sex in this relationship, but I still feel bad that I have to say it, and I'm still afraid that this person's going to walk away. But the truth of the matter is, if they're not willing to accept that as a rule, then that's not a relationship that I want or need. And I feel like our listeners need to do the same thing, have that same standard in their head, where if it's not something that you want or need or can handle, even though you're afraid, you have to say it, you have to set that limit.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to go into what you just said there as far as your personal need or personal fear of rejection. If you go back to my humor episode, where I've bring up again, I've made many mistakes, and quite honestly, there was a very specific point that I was going to make out of that episode, which has completely left my mind. Proof that we do record this live on the flow without everything being completely transcribed. But to get into just a point by itself, without that episode in play. As a sadist, I enjoy very much giving others physical pain, but I am not an emotional terrorist. So my fear in talking to her was not in being rejected. It was the fear that she would feel rejected. That, okay, well, here's this guy that we've known each other for some time now, and I've made it clear that, yes, I'm very willing to have sex with him, and he's telling me that I don't want to have, or that he doesn't want to have sex with me. So that was my fear, that I was going to hurt her. And I think most of the time when there are secrets, it's out of that fear of hurting the other person instead of just being honest about it and letting them deal with the emotional maturity to be able to handle it. I was very impressed with her and how she handled it, actually.
I think what you're saying right now is just a fine example of what a caring dom is. And I know it's off topic, but I am going to throw it out there because what you just said defines how a caring dom behaves. You care more about how the other person feels and how your submissive will take things than you do about your own wants in that moment or your own self. I guess, but you're still willing to uphold your own ideas, and that's your integrity right there. So I just really appreciate you being able to share that because it is such a beautiful example.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is hard. And people, I guess when I was defining DOMs way back in episode 3, that was one of the big points that I was trying to make too, is that, you may be a sadist, you may be, or you may not be, but just as a DOM, a lot of these insta-DOMs in this post 50 Shades world that we live in this stern, stoic way. And that was what I was going to bring up, from the humor episode, was how I started out way back then when I was just a newbie and wildly immature, to be completely transparent. I wouldn't have been so open and honest about it. I would have let my own personal fear of them feeling rejection override the right thing to do. And it is difficult, but it is the right thing to do. So I think it's so important for people to get that. So moving on a little bit further into this, how would you go about finding a play partner for celibate BDSM if that was what you were looking for? What would you do for that, Funsize?
Well, the first thing I would do is that I would put it out into the community in which I was looking or part of to look for a partner, that it was something that was off the table for me. I would put it as a hard limit right from the start before anyone even approached me. And I know we have an amazing interest and limits checklist on cauldronskrypt.com.
Yes.
And that literally is the best. I keep saying it's the best for a reason. And I would direct anyone that was interested in me in the sense of a play partner to that. And I would have that sex was completely off the table as one of those hard limits listed on there. And I feel like even if you don't use that checklist, I feel like just being upfront about that particular need, because I feel like it is a topic which is not necessarily a make or break for relationships, but it is such a vital topic that it can be a make or break for relationships. And you don't want to, waste your time with someone who's going to be 100%, there has to be sex of 50,000 kinds when you're saying none at all. That's too big a topic to kind of split hairs on.
Yeah.
So I would just be upfront and communicate.
Same here. A lot of people who are, I think everybody who is on FetLife that is actually in it for the right reasons, so to speak, whatever that may mean to them, whatever that may be, before they contact somebody, they're going to read their profile. And I think it's always good for people to put on their profile what their hard limits are. And then, of course, there may be others, but the ones that you know of, they're obvious things, no animals, no children, this kind of thing. I do have a list on mine that will show all of my hard limits. And of course, I can always link somebody or email someone a copy of my limits and interest survey. And I love that you bring that up because I was going to. And the really cool thing about filling that out is it does get emailed back to you. So you've got a copy of it. that you can print out and take to meet up with you, or a first meeting with someone that you're interested in playing with, or you can email it to them. It's yours to do with as you please. So it is a good resource there. Go ahead.
I was just about to ask you if you had any tips for our listeners on how to tell someone that you have met at one of your local munches once or twice about your limits and interest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that for me always tends to just flow naturally. Now that is probably due to my personality type, but I will either kind of throw it into the conversation, as I'm talking to somebody and we're exchanging what our kinks are. That's always a good opportunity. Or when we meet privately, not privately, but in public privately, I guess, just the two of us to further our discussion and get to know each other a little bit better after the vetting process. I got to throw that out there. That's the most important part of that, is the vetting process. When we meet up, I will actually take a copy of the limits and interests that I've filled out with me. And I don't always use it because I know what they are, but if they want a copy of it, I don't mind giving it to them. But as we're talking about different things that we like and don't like, it tends to just flow. Yeah, I'm not really big on that, but it's not necessarily a hard limit. Or, yes, I love this. And then the next thing may be, oh, yeah, that's a hard limit for me. And then we will discuss whether or not that's a deal breaker. And sometimes it is, and that's okay. Because if you're going to have an experience with somebody, you want it to be the absolute best experience that you can. It's your time. It's your BDSM. It may be time away from friends and family or some other fun activity that you want to do. And if it's something that is really important to me, if it's a kink or a fetish that I have, something that I need to fulfill myself, why would I want to waste my time participating in a scene with someone where I'm not going to be allowed to do that? And it's the same thing back at me. I've had other people say, well, we're going to be great friends, but I just don't think that we will connect as play partners because this activity is something that I really need. And when that happens, that is truly the moment that an amazing friendship starts 100% of the time, because I know that I can trust them. They know that they can trust me, and that we're not going to try to manipulate each other into something that the other person doesn't want to do. So I think I went a little bit far with the answer, but hopefully it's good information that people need to hear.
I think you went just the right amount with the answer. Because I think people can take away from that how important communication is. And I think that's the main point of 90% of our podcast, at least since I've been on board, is how vital open, honest communication is in this lifestyle. And I think this is just another case of that. My tip, as far as discussing it when you meet someone face to face, one-on-one in real life outside the online community, would be just to own who you are.
Yeah.
I know we all make mistakes, and I know that sometimes it's very tempting to do what someone else wants, but you have to own who you are. And people appreciate that, especially with these kind of relationships, because like I just said, it's all about communication.
Absolutely. Very well put. I think that pretty much takes care of everything that I was thinking on this topic. Anything else that you'd like to bring up?
No, I think we covered it pretty well, and I'm sure we'll dive a little bit deeper into it when, as you said, when we do our BDSM in the Bible episode, at least on the religious aspects of things.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one too. So it will be interesting, I promise. And hopefully I won't receive too much hate mail for that one.
I think it'll be really interesting and informative. So I look forward to it.
Go to kuldrinskrypt.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and the link to the Facebook group so you can take part in the conversation and be eligible for the monthly giveaway that we're doing. While you're there, click on the Support Us tab. You can find that Patreon link, donate $1, $5, $10, $25, and there's rewards for each level, such as stickers, t-shirts, hoodies. You can get a call from one of your hosts if you would like. At a high level, we will be able to arrange that for you. Again, that's kuldrinskrypt.com. I would like to give a shout out to Luna Star Angel, Scrumptious Brat, NNPW. She is a newbie to FetLife.com. Malkota Cantos, Merlin Kanasi, and Lord Hood. All have recently contacted me on FetLife. We will be doing an interview with Luna Star Angel and Scrumptious Brat coming up in the future, so stay tuned for that. They have an amazing story that relates to the 3-part series on red flags and fake dominance, so stay tuned for that. And I would just like to thank everybody for their questions, comments. Again, you can go to FetLife. I'm Kuldrin on there. Funsize, what is yours?
Mine is Funsize52 on FetLife.
All right, so feel free, questions, comments. You can also use the SpeakPipe method on the website. Just go to the contact resources page. And of course, there's always that call-in voicemail, 865-268-4005. All of our contact information is listed in the show notes. Funsize, any last thoughts?
Nope, that's everything for today. I just really look forward to hearing any questions or comments our listeners have.
All right. This has been Master Kuldrin and Funsize for KuldrinsKrypt.com. Unearth the truth.